This, I'm handovering the stage to the moderator, Dr. Bala.
Good afternoon. I must confess that this is one of the few sessions where I find a full house as an audience. A post-lunch session is possibly a punishment by itself. And to be the moderator of a post-lunch session is a bigger punishment for such an enlightened panel. But I'm going to risk it. I've been an activist. So being an activist is easy. You can be irresponsible. But being a moderator, it's a challenge because you got to be very responsible. So you got to balance views, and balancing the view of capital and labor, it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to try. At least I'm sitting in a place where I seem to be balanced. I actually wonder why they invited me. Honestly speaking, I'm not even sure why. My experience has been living with indigenous tribal communities in the forests of India, and coming to a conference of HR professionals. Either you people are very confused or the world is actually getting better. I'm glad that people understand that this world needs balance, needs equilibrium. What we are seeing around the world today, not just India, is a struggle to find this balance. But I think the only other reason I could tell myself why they possibly invited me is most of my students are actually students of labor and industrial relations. I teach at the Industrial Labor Relations School. Many of you might be familiar with it at Cornell. And so I thought the only qualification I have to be amidst you is borrowed qualification of Cornell. So that's all. But I have serious concerns. My concerns are not about labor. My concerns are not about capital either. My concerns are about the economic growth model itself, of which capital forms such an important component, and labor forms such an important component too. I believe the model that we see around the world, of which India is no different, it's a model where a lot of exciting things are happening. I think post-industrial revolution, if you look at the pace of change, the pace of growth, the pace of economic attainment, or the whole world as such, I don't even think, the narrative. I'll give a small example. I'm a public health expert. I'm a physician basically, then specialized in public health, and then moved on to public administration and leadership later on. But coronavirus, in my view, is possibly one of the world's biggest public health concerns. But look at major national, multinational, global bodies and their narratives. The narratives are not about the public health challenge. The narratives are about the enormous loss to the global economy. You get worried when the world talks about a particular health challenge as an economic challenge. And then you start worrying whether our priorities, our narratives are set right in this world at all. So I belong to the school of thought, having lived with extremely rich people in every other way except economic, but possibly consider the poorest of this country. I believe that there's a huge gap of understanding, and that's why the divergence. So divergence is not about how much of capital we control. I think divergence is about the understanding of each other itself. And so when you don't understand, the easier option is take an adversarial position. Nobody attempts to even communicate to that other to make them understand. So be an opponent. That's a very easy thing that all of us in the world do. And we're seeing it. The world of politics, the world of business, the world of everything that we see the opposition to our idea means I oppose you too. But my concern is what has happened because of this model, and can this convergence solve the world's problems? So I think I find myself a privilege to be here in this panel, but to just my opening remarks, and I'll quickly stop there, is I'm fully convinced that three major crises faces us, and I'm sure the panelists, I'll be talking, since they've already been introduced, I thought let me jump into it before handing over to them. The first crisis that we have created, this mad pursuit of economic growth, is an unprecedented ecological crisis. Well, some heads of government may dismiss it off and say climate change is a figment of scientists' imagination, but it's real. It's so real that all of us face it every day, but ecological crisis is something which we have caused. And maybe capital in its own way has cost, or the pursuit of capital has cost. The second crisis is, I think, something much more real. Is the enormous societal crisis, the huge inequities that this model of development has caused. 1% of India controlling 72% of India's wealth needs to be addressed. I'm not saying addressing is about eliminating the wealthy itself, but there are means to do it. And this is where, being an ardent fan of Vivekananda and a student of his work, I believe in what he said. A new India needs to arise not by pulling down the rich, but by pushing up the poor. And that is the convergence we seek. He said, a new India needs to arise not by a revolution, but by an evolution. Evolution of both capital and labor. It can't be one-sided. And I think today is an opportunity where this panel will possibly get those ideas into the board. And the third crisis is the crisis of the self itself. We as people, in this pursuit of growth and progress, have lost the pursuit of compassion, passion, and a country which is known for all this, peace, harmony, justice, equity, are all fancy, fashionable slogans spoken of in seminars and workshops, but not really lived anywhere. So I think, and then most of us don't even notice it. Young people around the world, unable to bear the challenges of these inequities, every year, 1 million of our young people around the world between 18 and 25 commit suicide. And then we don't even seem to notice it, unless it is our neighbor's son or one of our own family members. We don't even talk of young people and this world losing these young people. We talk of demographic dividends, but we don't talk about the aspiration leading to frustration and therefore leading to all these challenges when they can't meet look at this, when they can't understand the convergence. So to me, if you want to solve these crises, you can't solve it from the dimension in which you created it, like Einstein said. You got to solve it from new paradigms. And the new paradigm, and the only paradigm, is no longer can labor and capital talk against each other. They got to learn to talk with each other. We need to fashion a new economy, a fourth sector economy, where everybody is a stakeholder, everybody benefits by the economy, and everybody actually understands that we can make this a soulful economy, an economy filled with all that I described is missing right now: passion, compassion, fairness, equity, and justice. This is a model possibly is not just a solution for the problem. I don't think there's any other way. Unless labor and capital understand that we need to work with each other, unless they decide to be co-creators of this new evolution, a new paradigm, unless they decide that collaboration is not going to be just a sexy statement that we make to each other, but actually a way of life, we cannot really look at talking about triple bottom lines. And so to me, triple bottom line itself is inadequate. The planet, people, and profits is inadequate. We need to add the fourth P, and hopefully this panel will help us understand the fourth P is partnership. Partnership between everybody participating in this economy, where we honestly look at joining hands and working together. So I'm going to stop here, and then hopefully have each of our panel members speak 6 to 10 minutes. Now, seeing a full house, I'm tempted. I originally started off thinking 6 minutes, but after seeing some distinguished people here, and I thought this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn and enrich ourselves. And beyond the panel discussion, if we can take the ideas that come out of this room and actually try to put it in real practice, maybe the world will actually be a better place. So with these opening remarks, I would like to hold back and possibly speak a little bit at the concluding part, and start off possibly inviting one from, I don't know, capital, and then from labor. I'll have to be balanced also. I'm going to reserve Sri Sitaramji for the last, because I'm sure, I asked them why this panel, why 2 hours, why at the end of the session, and they said this is a star panel. So I'm very happy that people will be there until they listen to everybody. So we'll have 6 to 10 minutes of their sharing their views, and then I'll possibly have a few questions to each of the panelists and open it up to the audience. I have been told that we need to wrap up by at least 4:30. So I would be, the role of a moderator, I've actually enjoyed being a speaker because you can get away with speaking. But moderator has to also be rude and sometimes ruthless in cutting off our fellow panelists, all very senior people. And it's embarrassing for me to say 6 minutes is over, 7 minutes is over. So I would, every time I have been a speaker and I've been cut off, I always dreamt someday I have to be a moderator and get my sweet revenge on others. So all 4 of you, full disclosure, I might take my revenge if you exceed your time, because I want them to ask questions so they can get real benefit from the people sitting on the stage. So I would like to go first with Advocate Moore, and share your thoughts, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I must first congratulate NHRD for getting such large number of delegates here. The topic for discussions is divergence to convergence. I suppose I'm right, divergence to convergence. That is all the instructions given to me by the organizers. I was surprised when it was announced that I'll speak on behalf of the management. And there are going to be speakers for management, for labor. Mr. Yechuri will speak for labor. And they wanted to equalize 2-2. But the chairman again is, once again, my opponent. I don't have a chairman from my side. And then he was so clever, he said, Mr. Yechuri, you will speak at the end, because I found every other speaker coming from the Communist Party would like to speak at the end so that I can finish us off.
Don't tempt me, I can change the order.
The subject is very interesting. But this, over my 46 years of experience, has to a great extent been accomplished. When we started practice and we were appearing for employers in the courts or in the conciliation office, the two sides used to be sitting like enemies. But today that is not the situation any longer. Initially, the employees wanted some assistance from outsiders, and there was a large-scale exploitation of labor to start with right from the Independence Day. The officers of the departments used to be by and large corrupt. With the result, no labor law would be implemented. In fact, I remember a case where no separate toilets were provided for women employees in garment factory, where 95% of them are women. Then one of my clients, a multinational, he came and said, Mr. Murthy, are you sure you are all complying with the requirements of Factories Act and other things? And I said, I don't really go and visit every factory, but here and there. Then he said, can you accompany me to garment factory? We went there and we saw it was all open. No separate toilets, nothing of that sort. He told me, tell your client that my next order will not come until he constructs toilets. So this man suddenly put up some structure overnight and then said, my toilets are ready. He took me again and said, this is not what the factory's rules say. Glazed tiles, separate toilet, where are they? I will not give him the next order till he does all this. So it's not our factories inspectors who got these things done, though they visited several times. One of the magistrates told me when I cross-examined an inspector of factories, there was a fire, 4 employees died, and the inspector came to the box. I was appearing for the employer, I was cross-examining him. I asked him, how many times you visited the factory? 6 times. Do you have an inspection book? Yes, I have got the inspection book. One of the allegations is you have never put dangerous operations, fire safety and other things. Then I asked him, where are all these in your inspection note? The magistrate stopped me and said, young man, you do not understand, you've got to go a long way. This officer goes to the factory, sits in the office, has a cup of tea, takes his cover and walks back. So where do you get all these things? I must tell Mr. Yechuri and our the president of the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh that there are a number of clients of mine who say it is better to talk to a trade union leader than to talk to Murthy. For they find we are harder on them than some of the trade union leaders. We have come a long way. I don't think today's workman is illiterate at all. In fact, in one of my clients' place where they were discussing something about charter of demands and a settlement, even before the director, executive director can place the report, one of the office bearers gave entire report to the chairman. And when we asked, he said, we got it in the internet, sir, it is already there. Your chairman says it is doing very well, want to expand, do very well, make more profits, give more dividend. So now you don't come and say we don't have money to give you increase in salary. So they have become that enlightened. Divergence to convergence is a process which has gone over a period of time. It's nothing that we can immediately achieve from divergence to convergence. There are a few areas. The labor laws of this country, to my mind, is excellent. There's nothing seriously wrong with the labor laws at all. True, some amendments are required here and there. To cure a wound in the leg, I don't cut the leg. Some little amendments are required. On the other hand, what has now happened is, the government is coming with 4 volumes of codes, with so many other things which are there in this book, which will now start a plethora of interpretation before the courts, High Court, Supreme Court and so on. For already 70 years, our High Court and Supreme Court has interpreted labor laws. It is high time they stop interpreting labor laws, particularly the Supreme Court. If there is indiscipline in the industry, to a great extent it is attributable to the judgments of the Supreme Court. In one case they say a conductor did not give ticket. After all 2 tickets, I say, why do you dismiss him? This is maybe the first time he is caught not issuing the ticket. But Supreme Court says take a lenient view. Yes, you got to take lenient view. There are certain areas where you should take lenient view. Justice Gajendra Karkar, former CJI, he always said, when it comes to welfare provisions, I am fully with the labor. When it comes to discipline, I am with the country. Country needs discipline, otherwise there is nothing that can be done. One of my client came and said, how do I've got 2 more minutes? One of my client came and said, sir, all the papers are here. This particular workman, in a week, 4 times he comes late. Now, is it a good case for dismissal? Because from the last 6 months he has been doing that. I told him, why are you asking a consultant or a lawyer? Whom else should I ask? You ask an astrologer. If your case goes before a judge, I have a judge in the labor court today also, who comes every day, he comes late. What happens if it goes before him? He's a poor workman. As a district judge, I come late. Poor workman, if he goes late, what is going to happen? The level of judiciary, for 46 years, let me tell you, I am still teaching labor laws to the judges. Every time the judge changes, you must teach labor law. In one of the High Court cases at the Harvard bench, when I was talking, I was addressing the judge on a provident fund matter. He asked me so many questions. At one stage I said, Milord, I am tired of teaching these labor laws to these labor court judges and others. Every time new people come, after 6 months they are transferred. And then he had a book in his hand. He keeps it like this and says, what else are you doing now? In a matter which I argued before Supreme Court, 2 judges, when the speed with which I went, they said, stop Mr. Murthy, don't think we are experts in labor law. Start from 0. Is Supreme Court meant for starting from 0 in all the laws? Then when do you get justice? That is why PSs are pending. So ultimately, how does the country improve? How does employer-employee relations improve? To a large extent depends upon what impression you give to the employees about discipline and productivity. Both are missing. In fact, I have some charge sheets where I give a charge sheet for go-slow saying, 2 years back on the same machine you had given double the production, on the same machine you are giving half the production. That is go-slow. Now these are certain areas where trade union leaders, as against that I always say recognition of a trade union is compulsorily required. Why should there not be recognition of trade union when there is a right to form a union, right to form an association? It must be necessarily be present. A national wage structure is absolute necessity. Now just as the GST has come, Prior to GST, sales tax in Tamil Nadu will be 6%, sales tax in Karnataka will be 18%. Now, who will manufacture in Karnataka? So, all these discrepancies are all solved to a certain extent by having a GST. So also, some national wage policy which Justice Gajendra Gadkar in his report volume in 1969, he wrote 2, 3, 4 volumes, none of them were implemented. Now the people who are making this code, let me tell you, none of them have great knowledge about labor laws. They are given 4 enactments and they are told, please make it one. Pick up all things, make it one, print it and say this is called code. Today we don't need such stringent labor laws. Workmen and employees, their education levels are far higher than what it was. Now what you need is that they should be, my friend Mr. Babu Matthews, who was in AITUC, used to tell me, Murthy, your clients show me the balance sheet only when they are about to close the factory. Till then they will not show the balance sheet. It should be more open. What is the business, what is the trade, what is nationally what is going on, internationally what is going on, must be looked into. Without all that, if you simply say all these jargons will not help. We have to go together, nearer, consider the interest of the country at heart. As I said, this is not a new thing, this has happened. It can be better, it should be better in the interest of the country. And I don't want to take a long time because I see 3 of them already who are still to talk and express their views. Thank you for listening to me.
When he began, he was worried whether we are on his side or whether I am playing a non-partisan role. Now I am worried whether he is actually on the labor side. I think it's such an excellent beginning to today's session. Looks like there's going to be no fireworks because all of us understand that coming together has to happen. I don't think there's any going back on that. So now I would invite Sri Sajjanarayanan to share his views.
First of all, I am thankful to the organizers not only for inviting me for this program, but also for selecting a very, very, very pertinent subject for discussion. This subject assumes importance in a world where we are slowly moving towards a lot of uncertainties. The entire world is facing a slowdown. Our country is also facing it in the manufacturing sectors, textiles, automobile sector. So in all these type of issues, crises, the first suffer is labor. So normally as a trade union worker, we would like to take up that issue. So in a particular atmosphere where things are going very bad, these industrial relations requires a new look. It has to be revisited, it has to be reviewed. Especially when new types of industrial relations are coming up. We talk about Industry 4.0. And what will be the nature of that thing, nobody knows, only some surmises are coming up. Gig economy. What is gig means? You will find a lot of interpretations. Gig means it's only a momental, kshanigam, what we call it in Sanskrit. It's only momental. Everything will be only today one industry, the same industry will be something different tomorrow. So same way artificial intelligence, all these things are coming up. So what will be the future of industrial relations in the country or in the whole world? It is high time that we should think about all these things. And as far as trade unions are concerned, the most important issue is permanency of work that is vanishing from the face of labor. Everything is becoming contract labor. Nearly 80% of employment in the country is now almost going towards contract labor. Now new things like fixed term employment also has come up. Now you cannot think about a permanent job. Everything is going temporary. And you will find even the ministry, secretaries are going to be appointed from private sector. So they are also becoming on contract. So this is the way things are going on. And in all these types of turmoil, everywhere in the world, the government is slowly withdrawing. From banking sector, they are withdrawing, it's called deregulation. From the public sector, when they are withdrawing, it is called disinvestment. The price control, that is being withdrawn. So everywhere in the labor sector, inspection system, that is going out. So all these things make the system more complicated. So in fact, everywhere, if there is no system to guard or there is no rule of law, what will happen? It will be a chaotic situation. So this issue has to looked into in a larger, broader canvas. So why such a thing is happening in the whole world? It is happening in a country like India. That is because there are two defective and destructive paradigms in the world. One is capitalism. Capitalism finds it is based on an exploitative system. Always capital has to exploit the labor. This is the fundamental to capitalism. So a sort of a Shylockian approach. Shylock is a character in Merchant of Venice, you know. A type of Shylockian approach is building up in a fast mode everywhere. Profit. They are bouncing about the labor for blood and flesh. This is happening everywhere. There is another paradigm which our next speaker is representing. There is communism. Even though communism has vanished from the face of earth, still communism believes in an adversarial system, a set of that is capital and labor are in constant conflict. They are all that class war system is there. So in that they believed, but of late they have changed it. In 2008, you will be remembering Buddhadev, the CPM leader who was the chief minister in Bengal. He said, now capitalism is the only option for industrial progress. So we are adopting capitalism. So this much it has gone up. So now almost in the world, the capitalism has become a sort of a default paradigm. We can call it a default religion. It has become. So people think there is no alternate that is there. So in between all these things, we are losing the human element in industrial relations. This is the biggest issue. Worker is not seen as a human being. It is mere a commodity in capitalism. Worker is a commodity. Nature is a commodity. Land is a commodity in capitalism. Even women, they are treated as a commodity. Everything is a commodity. So labor is also treated as a commodity. So this type of commodification culture or commercial culture, that reigns in the labor industrial relations scenario. So what is the way out? For that purpose, we need to have a new culture. So first we have to blast this dichotomy between capital and labor. That has to be removed. Labor itself is a capital. That should be the new idea. Probably the most important capital should be labor. So this type of a new thinking has to emerge. Fortunately, India has got a very, very peculiar culture. Every institution in India, even today, is relationship based. A banker and a customer, it is relationship based, but the reforms coming from outside, it is destroying that system. How did this system came up? It is about a 4,000-year-old culture, I would say. Because capitalism could only survive for the last 300 years. Now it is facing crisis after crisis. Communism could not even complete 100 years after that October Revolution. But we have got a culture which is surveying for the last 4,000, 5,000 years. I will tell you one example from Mahabharata that is very relevant. Bhishma was lying in the Sharashaya. Yudhishthira went to him and he was asking about many things. So he asked a very, very complicated question. I am going to become a king. So how should a king rule the country? It's a very, very complicated question because many MBA graduates will be there. There are many business model, management models, complicated theories you might have studied. But Bhishma smiled and gave the most simple answer. What was it? Piteva pasi dharmajna. Rule like a father. Just like a father rules a family, you rule the country. So this family-based, relationship-based model, that is fundamental to Indian culture. That was why when 1998 there was an Asian economic crisis, India was the only country which was not affected. During the 2008 global financial crisis, India was the least affected country in the whole world. I heard it right directly from the mouth of many of the capitalist ideologues. So why India was least affected, even our country? It can withstand external shocks because of this relation-based system. Even our industries, they were all relationship. The workers were treated as their family members. Landlords treated their tenants as their own family. That we have seen. There are many aberrations, there are many exceptions. But this type of culture that was there, that has been systematically broken by all this Western type of this thing. So we have to change the attitude of our looking at things. HR, what does it mean? Human resources. It should be changed to human relations. IR, now new IR code has come up. Previously it was Industrial Disputes Act. There are many committees has proposed that industrial dispute is a negative term. It should be replaced by industrial relations. Now finally that has come up. We have many objections about that law, but still there are 2-3 good things. One is that name, it has been changed to industrial relations. Second is what we have insisted is, now there is a tripartite culture in the country related to industrial relations. If worker has got a problem, he has to run to the labor department and complain there. If the management has a complaint, you have to run to that place. That should be stopped. At the workplace, there should be a system by which the management and worker should sit like family members. They should take coffee and settle their issues. So a new chapter at the insistence of Bharatiya Masusang, it has been added, that is called bipartism. Now I have attended many discussions with CII, ASSOCHAM, etc. in Delhi on bipartism. A bipartite culture has to be started, at least at the floor level. If bipartism fails, then tripartism should set in. That was our this thing. So a new type of culture has to come up. So ILO has already found out, instead of saying 3 parties, tripartism, they have called 3 partners. Government, employer and workers. These are all partners of the same thing. They have to share the gains of progress. It should be shared equally. This concept has to be developed. That's why Bharatiya Masusanga, from the inception, it says Udyog Hit, Rashtra Hit, Mazdoor Hit. These 3 things should go together. So with that philosophy, we are moving fast towards a good world. So industrial relations requires a new culture, but unfortunately we are working in a entirely different atmosphere. The rules of games are different, so we have to go with that thing. That's why strikes are happening. So I, with a confidence that atmosphere has to change, a new culture has to come up where all the entire industrial people, they will sit like a family and sort out their issues and work together for a common progress. With these words, I can conclude. Thank you.
And this elite capture, these forces that are acting around the world, actually becomes much more humane. And unless that happens, I think the humanism that you spoke about is going to be work in progress. So I now invite Advocate Benny Thomas to share his views and possibly light the fireworks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Respected Sitaram sir, Murthy sir, Mr. Sachin Narayanan, Balagopal sir, ladies and gentlemen. When I was invited for this program, Mr. Sachin Narayanan is from my place. We both are from Kerala. So probably the organizers thought, Kerala, of course, is having labor issues. And probably Kerala is a venue where you get the most experienced people, both from union and from management. So both of us are invited, and Saji, of course, Saji spoke well. And I appreciate that his wisdom, of course, let it work. Good for the country, good for the growth, good for the industry. See, in 1952, when JNP courts, later on taken over by Madura courts, it's known as Madura courts. Originally, it was JNP courts, it's a Scottish company. And all the management staff, executives, used to be Europeans. And when they recruited around 2,500 employees in the workman category, and of course, Malayalis in the staff category, and most of the management category employees used to be Europeans. The top executive of the unit, they had only one unit in Kerala, that is in Trichy district. So the unit head, who was a Scottish, he called a meeting of the workers. And in the meeting he said, see, I am the head of this unit, and the management knows that you workers, you employees have problems, have grievances, but you have no access to us. Or if you given the liberty, then naturally you, probably 2,000 employees will have problems. So all the 2,000 come to us, we will be helpless. We may not be able to meet each and every one. So he suggested, you better form a union. And he is supported. He purchased the land for the union. And he constructed the building for the union. He encouraged formation of union. This was in 1952. And there, the union started functioning in JNP courts then. Subsequently, what went wrong? In 1967, when the company declared a lockout, there was a police firing because of the total breakdown of law and order at the company entrance, and one executive was shot dead by the police. Thereafter, in 1988, immediately on expiry of the period of long-term settlement, the union submitted charter of demands, and as usual, discussions were held. Unfortunately, that did not reach anywhere. 1992, again lockout. And that company, that unit could not recover from that lockout. And lockout was referred to the tribunal for adjudication. And the tribunal passed an award holding the lockout illegal. Subsequently, the matter went to High Court. And the management had little scope, probably that is those days. But in 1996, during the pendency of matter before the High Court, the management and the unions had long rounds of discussions, and finally in 1998 a settlement was signed between the management and the unions. This settlement was challenged by the workers before the High Court of Kerala. It is a reported judgment, probably first of its kind. And probably I would like to say last of its kind. Because the workers on one side management and the unions on the other side. Before a court of law, before the division bench of Kerala High Court, the workers argue against the unions. And the unions argue against the workers. Unions and management united. Unions and management on one side. They tried to justify the settlement. Workers, open court. Workers said, we don't recognize them as our leaders because they disowned us. Then the union said, union's lawyer, Mr. Balagangadhara Menon, he was addressing the division bench. He said, the same workers we represented in the court and we won the case for them. They were with us. Now realizing that the management probably has its own reservations or management realize that it's unable to run this unit, we had to sign the settlement with the management. Probably some of the rights, some of the reliefs granted by the court to the workers were taken away in the settlement. But the settlement supersedes the award of the court because the labor law is the only subject where even after the judgment you can have a settlement. But of course, any dispute you can have a settlement. But within the management and the union, the settlement supersedes the judgment, settlement supersedes the award. So settlement definitely was slightly against the workers or against the workers. So they couldn't accept it. They fought it out in court. Finally, the division bench upheld the settlement, declared that we cannot interfere with the settlement signed under the Industrial Disputes Act, because it's a conciliation settlement binding on all the employees. Matter was taken up to the next level, Supreme Court. Supreme Court confirmed that judgment. And now, if you look at who won the war, whether the management, the unions, or the workers. After this settlement or after the judgment of the Supreme Court, the unit was reopened with a skeleton strength of 600, where the strength used to be 2,500. And finally, after 10 years, the unit was closed. Now the unit is not there. Who is the loser? So, as Mr. Sajir rightly said, I have been handling the labor matters in Kerala High Court and also before various other forums, tribunals, and some other high courts also, occasionally in Supreme Court. But as Murthy sir said, when we stand up before the court, I do not know about other states, but in Kerala, tribunals or labor courts, we sometimes stand up with a handicap that you appear for the management. Because the generation of the management, you are wrong. You can't do this. The management will have to accept it. Because Mr. Sajid Narayanan says in his capacity of an external trade union leader, in his capacity, he says, I know the law, and this is the law, you can't do it. The management will have to accept it. So, just think in those lines. Forget the word industrial. Forget the word industrial, think only about relationship. And with one more, I think time is up, I will finish it. When Murthy sir mentioned about recognition of trade union, Kerala, we do have that statute. Kerala Recognition of Trade Unions Act came into effect, came into force in the year 2010. And it's a state enactment, and that gives recognition to the trade unions, and the trade unions are to be recognized by the managements, and the managements definitely, any issue the recognized trade union can take it up with the management, and the management will have to accept the recognition, the recognized leaders, and to go by their demands, discuss the issues, and sort it out. So, with that, I stop, and thank you for your patient listening. And I appreciate your patience, because the subject, or rather industrial relations or the labor law, is not a very interesting subject if you look at it from outside. Literally boring, but as our moderator said, your afternoon session, you are still very patient, and it's very, listening, I am really impressed. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And so now I request Sitaramji to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you, the moderator of the session, and the co-panelists, and all the distinguished managers of industrial relations or human resources, or whatever you may call yourselves as. But thank you very much for inviting me, but when I was invited, I was a little surprised. I still am surprised. Why have you called me to this sort of an exercise, which is a very important one, undoubtedly. I'm not detracting from the importance, but people like me, a declared communist who believes that there cannot be a possible convergence between labor and capital in the complete sense. What we can do is to narrow the divergence. So I'll speak in that sense, because the system itself, it's not a moral question for me. For me, it's not a moral question of why a capitalist system exploits. It's not immoral. The capitalist is not an immoral person. The system itself, the production process itself, what you contribute when you work, or labor contributes when it works, the product, the value of the product that is produced because of the contribution is always more than the wages that the laborer commands. That is where the exploitation comes in. That's a different question. We'll work to overthrow that. But as long as the system is there, what should be the objective? Objective is to narrow the divergences so that we can possibly have a prosperity for all and build a better economy and society and a better value system. That's the first point. The second is, I've heard the enlightened speeches and the virtues of family, and to run an industry like a family and to listen to the father, otherwise the compassion of the mother, or the well-behaved children. Unfortunately, in our country, the number of family disputes are more than the number of industrial disputes. So please. I think it's all very nice, idealistic. We can all be very happy about it, but that is not really the solution. If you really want to create a move towards the solution, we require a legal structure, a legal set of rules that are properly followed by all and properly implemented. It's not again a moral question of saying somebody is cheating. But in your structure itself, is there inherent cheating? That is what we have to ensure that doesn't happen if you want to talk in terms of convergence. The third point is that there are issues at the micro level and there are issues at the macro level. And micro level issues of individual disputes between one factory and one set of labor union and one sort of thing, these are important, they need to be tackled at that level. But I would rather concentrate on the larger picture of what is required in order to develop not only industrial relations and not only the competence of our human resources, but also the overall situation in the country and the overall economy, and in that perspective, what is happening. The first point, if you want to move towards reducing this divergence between labor and capital, how do you value labor? Today we have our Honorable Prime Minister and the Finance Minister repeatedly saying in the House of the Parliament, Prime Minister from the Red Fort, saying that we must respect wealth creators. But wealth is what? Wealth is monetization of value. Only when value is produced, wealth is created. And who produces value? It's labor. If you don't recognize that simple fact, then you cannot improve industrial relations. Labor's vitality is not only because he works to produce, but he produces value. And that value is what is converted into wealth. And that, therefore, if you want to respect the wealth creator, first and foremost, you have to respect the value creator. If you disrespect the value creator but respect the wealth creator, you create the society that we are today living in. We've heard our moderator telling us 1% of our country is rich, have 73% of our GDP or our resources, 112 or 116, I don't know the figure exactly, 112 or 116 billionaires in our country. Their wealth is equal to, it's 4 times the wealth of the bottom 70% of our people. Just look at this disparity. This is what happens when you respect wealth and not value. And unless you do that change, I don't think we can move concretely towards reducing this divergence. And that is where managers like all of you all, professionals, you will have to come into role, because it is a value system that will have to be internalized. That value production is the basic element in creation of wealth and prosperity. The second is also your approach towards labor. I'm sure all of you, I'm told, your basic formula for calculations in the HR departments of all major industries is what we call the CTC. That is cost to company. That's where, again, a fundamental problem I have. If you change your approach to say CTC is not cost to company, but CTC is contribution to company, then your entire relations will see a C difference. And this is how I think you'll need to approach if you want to really talk in terms of harmony. Now, why is it today that you have, when the value production, the producers of value, when they are not given proper treatment, what is the net result for the economy? Today, for the first time, we are seeing, after many decades, a fall in the real wages of working people. Real wages have declined, and this has not happened for many, many decades. The government tried to stop the publication of that survey, but somehow the information got leaked. But various other sources also corroborate to the fact that this is happening universally, not only in agriculture, not only in rural India, but it's happening even with industrial labor. That is, if that happens, and then what are industrial relations in a country where now increasingly the percentage of organized labor force in India, I think, is less than 7%. 93% of the labor force in India is contract labor or temporary labor or some other things for which there are no proper laws. Now, if that level of exploitation takes place at that level of labor, out of sheer helplessness, they may be part of the labor, otherwise there's no way they can survive. But if you cannot have a set of laws and a set of rules governing the 93 to 94% of unorganized labor, then you cannot have proper industrial relations. Now, instead of that, what are we having today? Your 44 labor laws. I don't know, Mr. Murthy, how long he'll be occupied with fighting labor cases, because the laws are all being abandoned now. You're coming down, and 44 laws are going to be brought into 4 codes. And your 4 codes, your wage bill. Mr. Murthy correctly was talking about, if you have a GST, you have a national wage as well. Correct. But then what is the basis for that wages? You said, but these 4 codes that you have now, one on wages, the other one on social security, health and safety and welfare of the workers. These are the 4 codes that you have now. And what is the important thing that is now being suggested and which will happen in the parliament? Once these codes are brought in and legislated by the parliament, the rules under which these codes will function will all be executive decisions. They'll never go back to the legislature again. The governments of the day will decide. And therefore, the legal possibilities of even going for legal solutions and remedies will also reduce, dramatically. So once they go back into the realm of the executive or that of the government, then there'll be only a one-sided affair that will happen, and that is the danger with this codification that is happening. Remember, labor laws in our country predate our independence. They predate, in fact, they go back to over a century now. And they all came with the development of factories and with the development of capitalism. And these laws, if you so sweepingly put them all across of the years of experience and decades of experience to protect the value of labor, to protect the rights of the labor, there's going to be serious problems. So the atmosphere in which we wish to improve industrial relations, that atmosphere itself in the macro level is being engulfed by a structure that is giving scope for greater disputes and misunderstandings and conflicts rather than a convergence. So those are areas also we have to work at. It's the industrial, the convergence between labor and capital is not to be found only at the factory floors or in a particular industry. It has to be a larger legal context in which this has to be drawn in. No determination of wages. Why is it in many countries in the world you have one national minimum wage? Whether the USA, whether the UK, you go to any developed country. India, we argue because of the diversities that we have, the cost differences, etc. Therefore, the wage difference, each state government will fix its own minimum wages. Kerala is the highest as far as our country is concerned. But this difference is, what is the trade union movement asking? I think it cuts across everybody. I mean, all the trade unions. They're saying at least declare a minimum wage of 21,000 rupees per month for unskilled labor. Governments are not willing. No, you have this sort of income inequalities and wealth inequalities in our country between the rich and the poor. You have a larger construct in which the government of the day refuses to declare a minimum wage, even a subsistent minimum wage. The well-known lawyers are here. They know that the Supreme Court ruling, it has given out 5 criteria on which wages should be determined. What are they? Per capita food intake, in those days of at least 2,700 calories per day for a family of 5. And then per capita cloth of at least 18 yards per annum, provision of housing as per minimum rent charged by the government industrial housing schemes, fuel, lighting, miscellaneous, etc., and an additional 25% of the minimum wage for education, medical expenses, etc. These were the 5 criteria set down by the Supreme Court. Are they being followed anywhere? Now that is where the problem comes in. So you have a very, I would say a very difficult job as HR managers, because you have laws which do not guarantee anything, and you have a labor that is discontent whom you have to manage. So between the two, it's a very, 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 very important role that you all have to play. That first of all, listen to the labor. Second of all, tell your employers also that they have to be reasonable and follow these laws. And you may draw your wages, but if your employer doesn't follows these laws, then you cannot be responsible for the labor unrest that will follow. So you have a very unenviable job, I would say, in order to manage this dispute situation. So therefore, in such a situation, when people talk of work culture, correct, there should be work culture, and as long as capitalism exists, so long as we don't have the political alternative to it that emerges, we are the only party which had been talking, and we're much abused also for saying that. Our trade unions once brought out a thing saying the work culture of the workers. She said, why are we talking of work culture? We have to fight for the workers, so why are you talking of culture? We said, no, the fighting for our rights also is a culture. It's part of the culture. And in fact, I have had from 30 years ago, when the industrial units in near Delhi were coming up, that Faridabad, Okhla, etc., when they were just starting, many of the owners of small factories, they would come to our office and ask me saying, sir, why don't you please establish your union? I said, why do you want my union? I thought all of you didn't want unions. He says, no, some union or the other will come, and they are what we call the percentage unions. The leaders bargain with the workers and take a percentage. If you are there, at least we can talk issues, we can talk politics, so therefore please set up a CITU union. And many places we did. No, we'll have to create that sort of a culture among the workers, among the labor. That's a separate issue that the trade unions are addressing, that they'll do it. But demanding a work culture from the labor, while you abandon all culture as the owner, that cannot be accepted. I go and tell a worker, you have to work your 8 hours, you can't be wasting your time, and you can't be producing less than what is possible in these 8 hours. He'll say, fine. But what about somebody who just signs on one file and gets away with making money that is enough for some 5 generations in my family? Unless you stop that culture, you cannot improve work culture here. So only in isolation, industrial relations cannot be improved. The convergence or divergence will happen only when you look at it in the totality, in the macro picture. And in the macro picture, there what we'll have to go to is bring about a change in our outlooks. Start talking of value creators rather than wealth creators. Start talking of contribution to your company rather than cost to your company. And then start building up on this with an effort to create an overall legal structure in which these rights can be properly protected and they are ensured and implemented. I think that is the only way in which we can make this workable. Because if you go back in our own history, there was a reference saying that we were not affected by the 2008 international financial meltdown. Correct, we were not affected. Why? At that time we said we are not affected because we stopped the then government in Parliament from declaring the rupee as fully convertible. If the rupee was fully convertible, we'd have all been washed out with that international financial meltdown. So when I said this once in Parliament, Pranab Mukherjee was then the finance minister. He got up and said, no, Yechuri, you're right, you stopped us from, full convertibility of the rupee, but we were saved because Indira Gandhi nationalized banks. Then I had to tell them, sir, even that bank nationalization was done under left pressure. Indira Gandhi wanted V.V. Giri to be the President of India. We said we'll vote for that candidate on condition of 3 demands: nationalization of banks, nationalization of coal, and abolition of private purses. And that was the bargain by which it was done. So even if banks were nationalized and we could protect ourselves from this 2008 crisis, give the devil its due, give the left its due, that we were able to pursue due to take those measures and do it. And that is what I said. Listen to us so it will improve yourselves also, not only us. People always say that you are only working class party, so you talk about the interests of the workers. No, it's the interest of the nation. Today, one of the worst economics going through is actually bordering on a recession. Why is this happening? Today I was asking your HR representatives from some of your bigger companies, and they were telling us the sales are at the lower. I mean, in fact, including Ashok Leyland, I was asking them, he said sales are very low. Why? The economy is not picking up, infrastructural activities are not happening. So what is the solution? We are in a state of a recession because people don't have the purchasing power to buy. If Britannia and Parle and ITC say that they are cutting down on production of biscuits in a country that lives on tea and biscuits, if sale of biscuits are falling, then you can imagine the state of our economy. And if that is happening, what is required is to increase the purchasing power in the hands of the people so that the economy can do a sort of a kick-started back. Instead of doing that, you give a package of 2,15,000 crores of further concessions to the corporates and the rich, saying that these concessions will help in increasing investments. My point is, even if they help in increasing investments, it's not automatic, but even if they help increase investments, who is going to buy what is produced by those investments? There has to be money in the hands of the people to buy. So what will those investments do? They can't kickstart your economy. Instead, that same 2,15,000 crores, if you had invested in public investment, built our infrastructure much needed, lakhs of new jobs could be generated. And once this youth start getting their wages and start spending them, these closed factories will start opening up and demand will start growing. And your sales will stop falling. Now, it is there. I mean, the solution or the direction of the solution is there. We can work out the nitty-gritties. But if you don't do this, what is the culture of capitalism that is being created? This is what is called crony capitalism, whereby the rich become richer, the poor becoming poorer, and in this sort of a culture, to expect the labor and the workers to also have a pristine culture of working honestly for 8 hours is a very difficult proposition. So we'll have to work for the overall change in the country. And that is where I think these sort of summits and these sorts of meetings is good. Let me just leave these two thoughts with you in your head. One is respect value creator, not necessarily only the wealth creator, and contribution to company instead of cost to company. If these two things, I think if you internalize them, we'll have a much better IR atmosphere in the country. Thank you. Thank you once again for all.
I think Advocate Murthy began explaining to us the journey, the evolution, and the fact that convergence is actually beginning to happen, and thought of an evolutionary process where the journey is going to extend. There were structural challenges, especially among the judiciary, that he explained. And we had Saji taking us through the uncertainties of labor, the challenges of defining what is going to be an industry, what is going to be labor in the context of AI, ML, a changing economy itself, and the struggle to discover humanism in capitalism, the challenge of looking at I versus we, and can we look at labor and capital together as we. We had Sri Benny Thomas talking about a relationship model, where he very articulately put it as a maternal instinct of HR people, which typical of Sri Sitaramji brought us back to pragmatic levels of understanding that, well, those things are nice, but family disputes are also growing. I really love the way he recoined the word CTC. I'm going to go back and tell my HR heads what actually it should mean. It's contribution to company rather than cost to company. And the notion of wealth versus value. When I mentioned the fourth sector economy, the paradigm of that is moving away from a situation of profit maximization paradigm to a benefit optimization paradigm. When you optimize benefits, the paradigm that Sri Sitaram Yechury was talking will happen. The structural challenges and kind of the structure that exists today, how it patronizes divergence rather than facilitate convergence. It patronizes conflict, the challenge of the informal economy, minimum wages. And when Benny Thomas spoke about being maternal in HR world, I think by the time Sitaramji finished his talk, I was actually wondering how many of you would want to stay back in the HR field, being sandwiched between capital and labor, which may not come together in this ecosystem that we operate in. But I'm glad that so many points have come up, so I'm going to hold back, and if the organizers could possibly circulate microphones to this audience, and then I'll point my hands, that's all that I can do, and hopefully we'll try to cover as much as possible in the next 20 minutes that we have. If some questions are left out, please pardon me. And when you ask questions, please make sure that you ask it directly to the panelists. And if I find one panelist being overloaded with questions, which generally tends to happen in a session, I might use my liberty of asking the next person to ask a question and sort of balance it out. So,
yeah, namaskaram. My question is to Mr. Yechury. I wish that your talk goes viral, but I have an observation. Last month there was some band has been called for by left trade union leaders. Even our union, they participated. It's a left aligned union. It's participated in it. But what I saw is they gave pamphlets for the people to participate, to the workers to participate in the band in a very muddy paper and all like. I wish that Communist Party, Marxist and as well as CPI, they embrace technology. This kind of a talks has to go viral so that the people, even it makes our life easier, so we can put it across the views to the management very effectively, which we cannot do in many of the times and all. Just I want to make it just...
Your complaint is about the muddied pamphlet? Or, huh?
Muddy pamphlet, and it's a communist, they are not using the technology, and they are conventional in organizing and communicating to people.
Yes, you're right. Fossilized in communications, maybe. I mean, that's a charge which I also have in my own party against my own party. Also, so we have to keep up with the times, and also in today's means of communication and all that we have. You're right. I mean, these are some changes that we require to do, we are doing, maybe not at the pace at which it is required or needed. But thank you for your suggestion. It's a positive thing.
I saw a hand there.
Sir, I'm so... This question goes to Mr.
1 minute. I think one request, and I think it will spare the panelists the trouble of finding out what is the question in the question. So let's keep the question brief. I don't think we have the time for you to explain your views and then ask the question. Just ask a question. And a question generally, as I know, from my kindergarten days, ends with the question mark. So please end it to the question mark and stick to the topic. Let's stick to convergence and divergence and not something general which you're busting to ask Echuria or anybody else here. Let's ask the questions limited to this discussion. All of us can benefit, and that's my request. Yeah.
This is Sumu Sundaram, part of NHRD Hosur chapter. The question goes to Mr. Sitaram Yechury. So it's related to the value and wealth creation. You know, simple example, there is a bus transport between Krishnagiri to Hosur. There are private buses as well as public transport. Private buses charges 34 rupees, public transport charges 43 rupees. Recently, bought buses are still uncleaned. Mostly this is done by the people who are in the union. Before asking the demands by the union members, are they being taught to do their job cleanly with quality? I wish to know whether they are being taught by the union leaders to do their duty. Because they are creating a devaluation.
That is precisely what I was trying to tell you, that we are probably one of the few political parties which talk of a work culture. We are very particular. We tell our people that you will first have to do your job before you do everything else. In fact, I think some of our unions have the rare ones who, in many enterprises and many industries, you have the union leaders who have the liberty to be absent from work, because they have to go to various, branches and things like that. But ours is probably one of the few trade unions which doesn't exercise that right completely. We emphasize on work culture. We definitely, for us, that is important. But as I told you, it's a very difficult task. The same workman with labor will come and tell me, okay, fine, comrade, what you're saying is correct. But if, as a minister, one signature on one file and he can make 2,000 crores, what is the culture there and what is the culture here you are expecting? You're understanding the point? So that in that atmosphere, to ensure a discipline also work culture is very, very difficult. That was what I was trying to explain.
Good evening. I'm Krishnan. My question is to Mr. Yechury. 47 plus crores is the working population in India, and the alternate commentary representing the labor is pulverized today. The alternate commentary does not seem to sell, and therefore you do not have the mass to trigger a change. And how are you going to address that?
Well, that is what we are currently engaged in addressing. You're right. The alternative narrative has to emerge, and it's emerging. It's emerging. There are 47 crore working people. You said more than 20 to 25 crore working people were part of the 8th January All India strike. That is a part of the narrative. I'm not saying strike is the only way in which narrative has to change. But sometimes it has to be forcefully felt by the society. And therefore, things like strike happen very rarely. It's not a regular course. But that narrative building, you're right, absolutely. That is what is happening now. And I think increasingly with this economic slowdown and the crisis, there's a much greater realization that unless these rights are protected, our very livelihood and our existence itself is at stake. There is today an existential crisis for the working people in our country. And for the labor, and particularly unskilled labor, it is actually a crisis for survival. Committing suicide out of distress is not a beautiful democratic choice. But if people are being forced to commit distress suicides, you can imagine the state of affairs of the country. So that alternative is emerging. It's emerging through life experience. is emerging through the work that we are all trying to do. But it is emerging. But I wish, like you, it emerges faster, but it is emerging.
In the current scenario, the human values has gone down, and the education value also gone down. B.Tech people are fighting to get the contractual job for 10,000, 12,000. And the graduates and master graduates are fighting to get the civic work in the corporation of town and in the cities. Why this and what went wrong in our country?
Advocate Murthy is trying to say, possibly I'll force him to answer this question. So, about degradation of values and what do we negotiate. So I think it's a much larger question than what this panel can handle, but still I'm sure Advocate Murthy will have an opinion to offer.
All right, your complaint is the value of education. Value of education is going down, and that appears to be your grievance. That's the grievance of the entire country. Because the value is going down, the value in the parliamentarians, the judiciary, the scientists, the people who work, politicians in particular, because the education value goes down, everything goes down. It's like demonetization in a way. So everybody will suffer. And that's precisely what is happening. The day this country decided merit is the last thing required for this country, that's the day they laid the foundation of destruction of this country. You want merit, you will survive. You don't want merit, have it. This is what we are having. This is the result of all our saying, no, this man from this religion, this man from this caste, this man from Northeast, this man from Maharashtra, this man from Karnataka. With all these things, value of education has gone down, value of the human being has also gone down. Sorry to say, there is no choice.
Good evening. Mr. Murthy, I only want to point, since you asked for the question for both. Sir, we already have too many problems in the country with the Citizenship Act and all these other things happening. So now please don't add this also, this question of reservation and merit and all this. we are already full of problems and trouble. But there's another dimension also. Why is it that PhD people with PhDs are applying for class 4 jobs? That's also happening. Overqualified students, it's not the value of education. The value of the educated has gone down. Education probably may have improved a little, but the value that you give to the educated people, that has fallen drastically in the country, and that is our biggest misfortune.
Good evening. I have a question for the panel moderator. This is about the wealth distribution in the country of India. Recent Oxfam survey says that 1% of the population in this country holding the 4 times wealth of the 70% of population in India. Is there a solution to overcome this?
Like I began my opening remarks with saying that the paradigm of the economy that we're subscribing to is fundamentally, in my view, I'm not saying that is a world view, needs a complete relook and a rejig. We would not have a situation of divergence between capital and labor. That question wouldn't have arisen if we had looked at a for-benefit economy, where all of us live for the benefit of each other, for society, for planet, and for each one of us. Now that requires trust, that requires visionary leadership, that requires a commitment to equity and equality which doesn't exist amongst people because we are all driven by I, right? It's never the larger perspective. I think in an ecosystem where we reward competence with higher salaries, we don't reward compassion with higher salaries, right? You have to change the paradigms. HR here in this room decide to make your assessment, performance appraisal, not just productivity-based performance, but humanized version of productivity. Benefits are never going to be understood. There is a model. A model is emerging. Many of us around the world have actually developed the taxation structures, the legal structures for how do you measure benefit, whose benefit are we talking about, benefit in what role, your role as a citizen, your role as a voter, your role as a HR person, your role as a company employee, or your role as a corporate entity. All of us have different roles, and the benefits can change based on those roles, and those can be computed, measured, and actually monetized, and all of us can have a equitable distribution. Equal distribution is never going to happen, should not happen. That will take away the incentive to be productive and efficient. But I believe it can, and a few of us around the world have actually come together, designed it, and we have presented it to the governor of California. And California being the 5th largest economy in the world, we have this strange colonial mindset in our country, whatever we say. And within America, there's a colonial mindset. Whatever California does, the rest of America will copy. And so we are hoping that that model, in the next month or so, he's going to formally announce that their movement towards a for-benefit economy. In India, we're talking about a social stock exchange, which is 10 years down the line. We don't even have the wherewithal. We have not even defined social enterprise in this country. We have not defined a for-benefit enterprise in this country. The benefit corporations of the United States, the community initiative companies of the UK, around 13, 14 countries in the world are moving towards that. And I'm sure if more and more such models come up, you will not need an IR Act. You will actually need a For-Benefit Distribution Act. And that is possible, it is likely, and I see myself, I hope I'm alive till then, to see a world moving towards that. Because if you don't do that, the world is not going to be saved anyway. It will be too late for all of us to bother about any of these things anyway. So that's my view.
Vice advice. I like to have one question, sir. Please clarify with me, for the sake of me and my audience. We have a code. The 44 labor law has been bifurcated, whatever, narrowed down, 4 codes. Say for wage code, already we have in India different minimum wages structures. Each country, each state have their own minimum wages. If you pay a baseline minimum wages for one line, some states are already giving more wages. Will not be any problem because we have our formula, we have our theory, economic theory. Benefit once given cannot be withdrawn. In that case, some people who are drawing more wages, they will get some reduced wages. Of course, those who are not drawing less wages, they can get some baseline wages. This is one point. The second point is, these codes are, in the codes, I was informed that the code itself, they are given provision for state government to frame rules. That means each state can play their own rules. Will it not have any discrepancy, any differences? This is the clarify. Please clarify this question. Again, unorganized sector, we have a national floor-level wages. Will it be equal to this wage code wage or any difference will be there? Please clarify, sir.
I said that when I was speaking, that in India, because of the diversities and our differences, that may not be possible. But when we talk of a minimum wage, we are not talking of reducing it from the wages from in states where they are higher, but increasing the wages of the other states that are lower. One wage, common wage, should be the highest wage that is being given in any state today. And that's when I gave the example of Kerala. We had this dispute when framing the law for the rural employment guarantee, where they said a wage was defined. At that time, when initially it came to 100 rupees a day, then the dispute came saying, but in the so-and-so state is much higher than 100 rupees a day. So we said, whatever be the minimum wage in that state. And then we said, you now increase and you make it uniform for all the states at the highest level. Not to reduce anywhere. That is not the thing.
44 central laws in the country are consolidated into 4 codes. Out of that, wage code is already passed by the parliament. Now the government is in the process of framing central rules. And every state will have to frame its own state rules. Now the question regarding wage is, what is the philosophy behind wage? We have got many concepts now, universal basic income that has come up. So a lot of confusing things are there. Now in 1948, when India became independent, there was a lot of vision about the future of India, about industrial relations, wage, etc. So a fair wages committee was appointed. It gave a report saying that there should be 3 levels of wages. One is, the law was to be minimum wages. Within a time span, the country has to achieve that minimum wages. After that, it has to proceed into fair wages. It's a higher level of wages. Thereafter, it should even proceed to living wages. That was the condition. But after 70 years, now when you look at the country situation, even minimum wages is not implemented. And it is implemented only 7 to 10% of the total working population. This is the condition. Now when the wage code was being drafted, we were there from the inception till this day, we are there. Now in the framing rules also, we are fighting with our own government. There, the question of national wage came up. So we were strongly for national minimum wages because there are variants between different states on wages. Because of that, once workers from one state migrates to another state because of the different levels of wages. So we wanted a national minimum wages. But the government was compelled to form a wage level which is lesser than minimum wages. It is last about 10 years that is going on. 2011 it was started. That is called national floor level wages. It is still continuing. Now the central government's job is to fix this national floor level wages. We said it is something, a insult to the entire society because fixing a wage which is lesser than minimum wages. Minimum wages itself is a subsisting level of wage. So you cannot go below that. But unfortunately that has been there. So in the new wage code that we have accepted, we said government you should immediately pass it because of two reasons. One is the last worker in the country is now getting the right to wages. Previously it was not there. That minimum wages had a lot of schedules. So only 7 to 10% of the total working population were covered. Now the last worker in the country is now covered with code on wages. That is a revolutionary idea. That's a very brilliant thing, so we accepted. And second thing, now it has become a big controversy which the employer side did not take it seriously. Now the employer side finds it's very difficult. Why? The employer organizations were always complaining that there is a labor inspection system. Once you complain that I am not getting minimum wages, he will inspect the place. He will take, as already said, he will take a cover and he will go. Neither the employer nor the worker is benefited by the inspection system. So what is the alternate? So we proposed one idea. We proposed that the inspector is threatening the employer. Why? Because he has got the right to prosecute. So that prosecution right should be given to the worker, the aggrieved party. That is the law of the country. Everywhere complaint can be filed by the aggrieved party. The worker is the aggrieved party, he should be given the right. And also the trade unions which represent, they should be given. And after long discussion that was accepted. Now section 52 has become a revolutionary, it's a first time such a right is given to the aggrieved worker in the labor scenario. Previously Payment of Wages Act had that provision. Now minimum wage also that provision has come up. Now the entire employer organization are now complaining. This is going to be a big weapon in the hands of the worker. So that has to somehow that has to be changed. But it cannot be changed now because already it has become a statute. So that discussion that is going on in the country.
It was a wonderful discussion. I would like to leave with the note that Mr. Benny Thomas raised about women in the maternal instinct. In a nation which has lost 10% of its workforce, the women from the economy itself, and in a room where women are spotted more by exclusion than by inclusion, there are hardly 4 or 5 in this room. I think if you really want HR to be maternal, you must have a maternal presence in the HR. And hopefully this country will see trust in the capital sector to trust a woman to lead HR, not just in IT sectors, but in also other sectors. And when that happens, maybe our nation will possibly truly move ahead. Thank you all so much. I thank all the fellow panelists for the wonderful, the privilege of moderating it. And possibly they bore with me. So I must really thank you for your patience and presence. Thank you.
Now it's a time to recognize the panel speakers. Now I call Mr. Murthy, President of NHRD Hosur chapter, to give you a memento to Dr. Bala Subramaniam. Thank you, sir. I call Mr. Raju Armugam, Regional Head HR, Sterling Highlights, to give you a memento to Advocate Benny Thomas. Thank you, sir. I call Mr. Manivannan, DJ Mayar, Avtech Limited, to give you a memento to Mr. Saji Narayan. I call Mr. Nagarajan, Head HR, Tab India, to give you a memento to Advocate S.N. Murthy. Now I call Mr. Israel Inbaraj, General Manager HR, TCS, and National HR Board Member, to give you a memento to today's Chief Guest of the program, Mr. Sitaram Yechury.
Thank you, Babu, for your wonderful coordination. It was indeed a very enlightening session. I request Mr. Soundarajan from CPM, CITU to please come on stage and honor our panel coordinator, Mr. Babu, Manager IR from Apple. The gift hampers from Mr. Srinivasan of Neil Auto Products. Okay, Mr. Vadivelan Gopal.
NHRD Hosur chapter, GMHR, TAB India Granites, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening to you all, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. This is not vote of thanks, this is vote of confidence. Before I submit, IR submit, I submit like this. I recall the golden saying of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He was having a vision that India will become superpower in 2020. Now IR summit is 2020 is a step towards that. So we have made a venture now that we will help in the nation becoming superpower. In fact, yesterday we started with selection, election, now ended with conflict to confluence. So many moderators were there, speakers were there, so many ideas were brought in. Everybody were moved, as I observed, from Dr. Chowdhury's Managing Director of Jaipur RAGS, how he experimented the truth. I recall Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's my experience with the truth. So he had a lot of experiments with his own life and he became rich. From rags to riches, he has proved it. So all the panel members, I thank you very much, and all the panelists, moderators who had brought in so many changes. Still the echoing of words of Raj Narayan and Raj Mohan is ringing in my ears. It is echoing in the auditorium even still now. I thank all the sponsors, venues, Holiday Resort Valley owners, and then our Success Media, everybody who have been helping in making this function a grand success. My especially thanks our NHRD Hosur chapter team who has been taken this task. It was a very Himalayan task. For the past 1 month, they have been struggling to arrange this venue and also arrange for the delegates. I thank all the company, those who have sponsored, all the delegates for this conference. And Success Media and other venue arrangement, Dine and Dance, and so many others whom I have now left. Those people, they deserve to be thanked very much. I really, the Raj Mohan and Raj Narayan and all those wordings, and then currently our S.N. Murthy's version, and then what is happening in this world. And only thing is shocking news was, labor law judges do not know labor law, they have to be taught. That is a major issue with us. How as HR managers, IR managers, how we are going to face them, how we are going to tackle our future disputes and all, how it is going to take up, we have to see. It is a big challenge. So all this, I thank everybody who have assembled here. I am really thankful to the organizers of this NHRD team, headed by Mr. Director Inbaraj, headed by Mr. Murthy, and then on top of it, Mr. Dhananjay Singh from Delhi. He has been coordinating all these activities. I really thank them very well. And then I thank everybody individually who have been patient enough to stay till today, till evening, to patiently listen to all the speakers, panel members. I thank all the moderators, all the panelists who have shared their experiences. Thank you all, my dear friends. We will meet again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We have a couple of felicitations to make. Can we have Mr. Mallesh Reddy on stage, please? He's been a travel partner who helped all of you commute all the way from Hosur, wherever you were, to the venue and back. Mr. Mallesh Reddy, to honor Mr. Mallesh Reddy, can we please ask Mr. Nagarajan, our advisor, to please honor Mr. Mallesh Reddy? Can we have Mr. Murthy sir on stage, please? A shout out to all our sponsors, the gold sponsor Titan Company, Mr. Suresh from Holiday Valley. Mr. Shankar from Success Media, who's been doing all the video coverage, who cut the highlights till 3 a.m. yesterday to make sure we saw it today. Mr. Ravi, who's been an integral part of the venue, who gave us the audio tech. Thank you, sir.
A big round of applause, okay, as announced by Mr. Modi. Yeah, thank you to the team. Raj from Caterpillar on stage.